Hi, it's Dwyer, March the 22nd, 2017. For those of you who are a little bit older and who remember the Newlywed Game and the dating game from the 1970s, let me just say, Chuck Barris, rest in peace. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, from time to time, I go back and I look at old videos here and I read the comment section of the videos, right? And I come across statements like, Dwyer, you're full of you-know-what. This is the most absurd video you have ever made. Dwyer, have you been drinking, etc., right? I came across a lot of comments like that after the Golovkin fight. Many of you took exception to the fact that I believe Golovkin won the fight, right? Many of you believe Danny Jacobs won the fight. Dare I say Golovkin, a guy who had a KO streak of 23 straight, probably isn't getting the respect that he's received over the last few years. Well, I'm a big believer in buying low, right? I follow investors like Jim Rogers, right? Contrarians who believe that the best time to buy a stock or an asset or to make an investment is when it's unpopular, right? So right now, I'm investing in silver, I'm investing in gold, right? If you go on YouTube and Google Dwyer dark coin, right, Ethereum, you'll find out I invested in those back when they were less popular than they are right now. Well, right now I'm also investing in Gennady Golovkin, right? Understand, that was Danny Jacobs on the canvas in the 4th round against the guy who had stopped his prior 23 opponents. So what that means is in Golovkin's last 24 fights, right, his opponents have been stopped or knocked down. That includes the Jacobs fight. Now, there are a lot of very popular guys right now in the sport of boxing, right? Guys with a lot of fans. But I'm telling you that there are very few historical fighters. Golovkin is historical. When you think about the middleweight division, and that's one of the marquee divisions in the sport, right? There are very few names who really can be mentioned along with Golovkin's name. He really belongs on that division's Mount Rushmore, along with, and this is my list, you have yours, Carlos Monzon, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, and Bernard Hopkins. Let me say this too. The people here on YouTube, keep me honest. I know there's a group of you. I know Nat Fleischer back in the day felt that Stanley Ketchel belongs on this list, right? He's the middleweight champion who was fighting the heavyweight champion, the great Jack Johnson, right? Picture Golovkin fighting Deontay Wilder, and Ketchel landed on Johnson and dropped him, right? That's significant because Johnson ran roughshod through people like Jim Jeffries, right? If you're talking about major fights that Johnson had, the Ketchel fight deserves to be mentioned. Also, Ketchel died in his mid-20s. The circumstances are a little bit murky. I believe that added to the mythology. Now, whether you include Ketchel on this list or not, just understand that Golovkin certainly deserves to be on this list. Now, there's politics in boxing. That shouldn't surprise anyone. Guess what? Oscar De La Hoya, Canelo's promoter, his business partner, Bernard Hopkins, predicted that Danny Jacobs would beat Golovkin, right? Let's just say that, it's a stretch to believe that Hopkins is going to become a fan of Golovkin anytime soon. After all, it's Hopkins' record of title defenses that Golovkin is hunting down, right? Well, whatever Bernard thinks, whatever anyone thinks, what you need to realize is you have to go back to 2008 to find a guy who did not get knocked down or knocked out, right? So Golovkin really is a tremendous fighter. Tremendous fighter. There's a crowd out there, the Kell Brook crowd. They want you to believe that a guy who had his corner throw in the towel in the first 6 rounds tested Golovkin in a fight in which Golovkin never hits the canvas and is never dazed and confused, right? Such is the public narrative right now concerning Golovkin. Well, I'm from the other side of the street. Let's talk about Billy Joe Saunders, southpaw, right? Has a share of the title at middleweight. There's talk that Golovkin might cross the ocean to fight Billy Joe, and no doubt many of you saw the Danny Jacobs fight and noticed that Golovkin had some problems there. There's a transition period when Jacobs goes from righty to southpaw, right? Golovkin looks a little confused. Jacobs looks good in like the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds, right? Okay, I hear you. The argument is that Saunders is a southpaw, right? If Golovkin, who's in his mid-30s, suddenly many of you want to put him in an old folks home. If Golovkin is slowing down, and if he has a problem with southpaws, why wouldn't he have a problem with an unbeaten southpaw? Isn't that the argument? Just understand, though, that Abel Sanchez and Golovkin have guided Golovkin's career in such a way that Golovkin has fought guys who have had different styles. I don't believe it's the southpaw stance that threw Golovkin. I believe it's the change in the middle of the fight. Jacobs, who is completely fluent, obviously as a righty, right, is also fluent as a lefty. And Golovkin got in a game plan where he started throwing his jab a lot. So suddenly, Golovkin wasn't able to land his jab, right? The other guy switched on him. It's the switch that threw Golovkin off. Well, how does Golovkin do against southpaws? Let's go back to the Willie Monroe fight. Wasn't he a southpaw? By the way, Golovkin was so confused against Willie Monroe that we get to the 2nd round and Golovkin knocks him down twice. Monroe gets stopped in 6 rounds. 6. Right? Monroe also was quoted after the fight as saying that due to the body shots he was getting hit with by Golovkin, here's the quote, "By the 3rd round, I couldn't feel my right leg." Think about that. Guy couldn't feel his leg. He'd been hit in the body so much that he started to lose control of his legs. Now let me offer an opinion. That's what I try to do here. You know, Willie Monroe moves around the ring a lot better, and I mean a lot better, than Billy Joe Saunders. Let me also offer another opinion. Danny Jacobs. You know, Jacobs has one of the harder punchers in boxing. He's a big puncher. When you're fighting Danny Jacobs, you really can't jump in on him. Because if you do, you might get hit with the kind of bomb that took out Kid Chocolate. Right? Danny Jacobs, very heavy-handed. Dare I say Danny Jacobs hits a lot harder than Billy Joe Saunders? Right? So, whereas Golovkin's a bit measured against heavy-hitting Danny Jacobs, do you really think he's going to be measured against Billy Joe Saunders? I don't. Think about comfort level 2 in the ring. Billy Joe is a guy who likes to be a little bit outside of the pocket against you, right? Or on the edge of the pocket. Then as you throw on him, he'll do things like lean back, right? He's a leaner. He's a guy who'll depend on spacing. He's a master at spacing. And he'll lean and your punch will end here. And he's good, right? So that lean had him beat a heavy puncher, in my opinion. Andy Lee, right? Andy Lee does hit hard, right? By the way, I picked Saunders in that fight. I respect Saunders' boxing ability. But this is Golovkin we're talking about, isn't it? Right? Golovkin has long power, right? Your margin of error against Golovkin is about this much, right? Danny Jacobs fought a great fight, made a mistake, ended up on the canvas, right? Was able to get up, dust himself off, survive the fight barely, right? Now you're telling me that a guy who's a better athlete than Billy Joe Saunders, and that's who Jacobs is, right? Jacobs usually ends fights strongly, right? You're telling me that he barely made it through a fight against Golovkin. And let's face it, even members of Saunders' own family are wondering about his stamina after the second half of his fight against Chris Eubank, right? Weren't you watching that fight thinking, oh, he's schooling Eubank. Oh, man. Is this fight going to be a shutout? Then suddenly you hit a stretch in the fight where Saunders looks like he hits a wall, doesn't he? Eubank comes all the way back on one judge's scorecard, right? That decision's a split decision. Saunders looked like he ran out of gas, right? So I know many of you are down on Golovkin right now. Sounds good to me. If I'm in the casino and they post odds on Golovkin against Saunders, if that fight is negotiated and happens, and that's the rumor, right? Count me among those who will quickly get up to put my money down on Golovkin by knockout. Now look, Golovkin didn't beat Jacobs by knockout. I lost on that fight. I'm not here to claim otherwise. Right? I know many people are going to be hesitant to take a Golovkin by KO prop. They're going to remember the Jacobs fight, right? They're going to be at the counter. They're going to say, do I want Golovkin by KO? Maybe I need to take these much weaker odds on Golovkin simply to win. I'm not one of those people. I think Golovkin stops Saunders. Right? I think Saunders is going to be in there trying to be cute. I think the boxing media is going to try to sell this fight as unbeaten Saunders, perhaps catching Golovkin at the right time. Right? Didn't Jacobs go the distance? How many Danny Jacobses are there? Let me say, I take Jacobs over Canelo. I believe I said so before the fight. Right? Jacobs might be, in fact, likely is the second best middleweight on the planet. I know there's a group of you right now saying, no, Dwyer, you got that wrong. He is the best. Well, understand, not everyone is Danny Jacobs. I believe Saunders is going to find that out the hard way. I don't believe Golovkin is going to have a hard time finding Saunders' body. I don't believe you can beat Golovkin. I still don't. From the outside in. I know Jacobs, according to Bob Arum, won 5 rounds. Okay, fine. Jacobs had his moments. But I personally don't believe you can beat Golovkin from the outside in. By the way, Willie Monroe, who ends up getting KO'd in the 6th, slick southpaw, he believes he had his most success inside. Interestingly enough, for the boxing public, he believes Canelo beats Golovkin. Right? I personally believe, and you know this, that Golovkin's toughest fight was Kasim Uma because Uma gets inside and is right here on him. right? I believe Chris Eubank, style-wise, would be a good matchup for Golovkin. But Saunders isn't going to be able to get inside and be right here. Right? Danny Jacobs, who landed some body shots, wasn't able to get inside to be right here. And I got news for you. Since the Uma fight, Golovkin has developed one of boxing's better jabs. Right? You don't believe me? Even with Danny Jacobs' southpaw heroics. Look at the CompuBox numbers from that Jacobs-Golovkin fight. Golovkin lands a lot of jabs, folks. That's the difference in the punch output. Right? That jab kept Danny Jacobs honest. So, I know it's unpopular right now. Just like buying silver's unpopular. Talk to me in a year or two, right? But right now, buying silver's unpopular, right? People boo you. Buying gold right now is unpopular, right? Supporting Golovkin right now is unpopular. I'm sure many of you are cringing when I mention him in the same breath as Monzon, right? Hagler, Hopkins, right? Many of you are cringing. But that's where he belongs. Let me just add too, because I always get emails, right? The boxing hardcore love to comment on videos here on YouTube. Ray Robinson, for all of his brilliance, was a much better welterweight than he was a middleweight, right? Look through his record. You're going to see names like Randy Turpin. You're going to see names like Gene Fulmer. You're going to see that Rocky Graziano knocks him down, right? Robinson didn't have the level of dominance at middleweight that Golovkin has had, right? Or that the other guys have had. Just food for thought. So Ray Robinson might be, and we can debate this. I know there's a Floyd Mayweather crowd out there, right? Ray Robinson might well be the best fighter in history pound for pound. But he's not the best middleweight. He doesn't belong on the middleweight division's Mount Rushmore. Anyway, that's what I think. The purpose of this video is to say I like Golovkin by KO over Saunders. That's what I think. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. If you're going to hedge with Saunders, I wouldn't even waste time picking Saunders, who's not a big hitter, to win by KO. My hedge would simply be Saunders by decision, right? Let me say this too. I am a believer that when a guy wins a fight that a portion of the public feels he got rounds he didn't deserve, I do believe there's blowback from the judges. I know intellectually it makes no sense whatsoever, but I can tell you that after Oscar De La Hoya beat Pernell Whitaker, right, and after there was some controversy, his loss to Felix Trinidad, let's just say he didn't have too many friends judging that fight, right? I'm just telling you what goes around comes around. Chocolatito, very tough fight with Carlos Quadros. Chocolatito barely makes it to the end of the fight, right? Quadros gives him his toughest fight to date, in my opinion. What happens? He has his last fight against Rungvisai. The fight's close. The fight's close. The judges go with Rungvisai. I think Golovkin understands he cannot have another fight like the Danny Jacobs fight, leave it in the hands of the judges, and expect a fair shake. So I think he's going to be in the gym. I think he's going to be ready. I think Jacobs was an outlier. In other words, Jacobs is better than advertised. Much better. Right? I believe Jacobs is better, as I said, than Canelo. I believe Jacobs is better than Billy Joe Saunders. I believe Golovkin's going to get back in the saddle. I already feel sorry for his next opponent. If it's Saunders, I'm expecting Golovkin to win that fight by KO. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Let me also say this too about Stanley Ketchel before I leave. There's a lot of folklore about Jack Johnson fights. A lot of it is straight up racism, right? People want to believe this fight was fixed and that fight was fixed. Now, it is true that Ketchel and Johnson were boys. These two guys hung out together, right? There's folklore that the two guys had a gentleman's agreement before the fight where they were going to try to just fool around and dance for 20 rounds. Because apparently if you got to the 20-round threshold, that made the fight more of a box office seller on the fight film circuit, which was big back then. But I got to tell you, YouTube is a funny thing. You can actually watch several rounds of that Ketchel-Johnson fight, at least the highlights. And I'm just telling you, I'm not sure if I buy the mythology, right? It looks to me like Ketchel and Johnson at times are having a real fight. And it does look to me that the 5'7" Ketchel catches Johnson clean and Johnson hits the canvas. Now, all you need to know about Jack Johnson is what Johnson does when he gets up off the canvas. But just understand, I personally feel Ketchel does catch Johnson, and I don't believe Johnson's in there just playing games. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. Boxing is such that more than 100 years later, right, in talking about the great moments of the middleweight division, we're remembering a middleweight champion who got in a great shot on a heavyweight champion. By the way, that's how much boxing's changed. Back then you had middleweights fighting heavyweights. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.